Okay, so we are now recording, and now I'm going to go live. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we'll be off to the races, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Hi, everybody. It's Mike Cadieux from Procurement Foundry here again with another amazing panel discussion from Procurement Foundry. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds because we've got a huge audience expected for this today, over 200 registered attendees. And I can see the room already starting to fill up with lots and lots of people. We're already at about 30, probably climbing to somewhere around 100 and 150. So super excited about the engagement today and the in the audience. I think this is going to be an amazing discussion around digitalization, transformation, automation. We're going to talk a little bit about managing expectations at the scenes level. We're going to talk a little bit today about how and what is required for employees and professionals of the future. We're going to talk a lot about the structures in transformation and how that all works. And we have all the wonderful folks at App Orchid and Contract AI to thank for today with Amrita Joshi, Shachi Gupta, and Tomas Wiemer. And so it's going to be, if it's anything like the pre-conversation that we had last week around this topic, I think we could have probably recorded about 3 hours of discussion on it. And we're looking for your feedback and input today as well. So that said, a little bit of housekeeping. We do have Q&A and chat set up. Please feel free to tell us where you're coming from inside of the chat. We do ask that if you have questions, and I'm sure you will have a lot of questions on this topic, please feel free to put them into the Q&A. We will be monitoring the Q&A. I will try to get them into the discussion as it makes sense. And we'll try to get through all of the questions today. But if we can't get through all the questions today, Tomas and Shachi are both active members inside of the Procurement Foundry and have agreed to actually take messages and comments from you. And Amrita is available, and she'll talk about how you can get in touch with her as well. And we have plenty of information, especially with posts and some of the other marketing that we're doing together. So without further ado, let me welcome the guests. I am super excited about this topic. This is something that is very, very big inside of Procurement Foundry right now. It's the #2 topic right now inside of Procurement Foundry around digitalization of the workflow and supply chain process. So super excited to talk to you about that. And we actually have a conference coming up about that on June 3rd as well. So why don't we go around the horn and do some introductions. I'll start with ladies first, if that's okay with you. Shachi, why don't we start with you? If you can tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and what your position and role is. That would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike. I'm so excited. As you know, I'm a big fan of Procurement Foundry. It is one of my most favorite, communities that you have created.
Thank you.
I currently work for Bristol Myers Squibb, and as you all know, it's a biopharma where our focus is really on the patients, so patients first. And within the strategic sourcing and procurement group, I wear 2 hats. So I actually lead functional strategy. So everything around category and sourcing excellence, supply diversity, our enterprise risk management, building those capabilities which are core to our procurement function, as well as a digital hat, which is everything around data, analytics, and technology. I personally have a very a diverse background. I grew up in Africa, in Asia, and now in the US for the past so many years. And I'm very passionate about what BMS is doing in terms of supply diversity and innovation. So I'll be talking about that in a bit, but excited about this conversation. I'm a data head, so digital transformation is everything that I love. So I love this topic. So
I don't think I've ever heard anybody call themselves a data head before. So that's new to me. That's great. I'm going to write that one down. I think I'm a little bit of a data head as well. I like to spend more time in Excel and Power BI graphs than anything else. So maybe I'm a data head. Amrita, great to see you. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and what you do. That'd be great.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. My name is Amrita Joshi. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of App Orchid, and we're here in regards to our product, Contract AI. Background is I've been in marketing for B2B tech companies for most of the last 15, 20 years, but prior to that was actually a sourcing advisor for a bank and did sourcing consulting. So I've come kind of full circle with now working on digital transformation for the procurement space. So really excited to be here. Very happy that our two other speakers, Tomas and Shachi, are just like the perfect fit for this topic. So super excited.
Yeah, I'm happy that you're here because obviously we talk to a lot of practitioners from time to time on webinars like this. We don't always have folks from the industry side, from the tools side. So I think it's going to be great to get your perspective on some of the things we're going to talk about as well. So thank you for that. And last but certainly not least, Tomas, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about what you do, where you work, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, hi. So hello, everybody. So thanks, Mike, first for the opportunity here. So yeah, so I have been in several industries. I worked in the chemical industry, oil industry, perfumery industry, and then telecom. And then now I'm with Juniper Networks, which is a tech company based in California. Myself, I am sharing my time between New Jersey and in the Catskills in New York, especially with COVID time. Yeah, so after having managed many years global organizations on the direct side and on the indirect side, I really want to reinvent myself, and then I then rebuild completely my profile and my passion in this digitalization side. So, and when I go into digitalization, it's not just putting tools in place, but it's really what happens to the organizations. It's what I call the emotional intelligence side. How much organization get impact by that? What skill sets you need to consider to develop? How far you want to deal with the transformation that companies have invested, and then the difficult question: where is the ROI? Which is not just only money. There's much more behind that. So those are the points that I specialize in now. And yeah, as other were saying here, it's really a great topic, and I hope that others can follow this path.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to have to follow this path, whether they like it or not, to be honest with you. I think it's the future of the industry. I think it's the future of the profession. And certainly just from doing a heat test of what's going on inside of Procurement Foundry, I mean, it's like I said, it's the #2 topic inside of the community. So obviously it's a direction, it's a movement inside of the industry, both on the supply chain and on the indirect side, regardless of where you are in the space. It is front and center everywhere we turn. And I personally, just a quick shout out to the Catskills, one of my favorite places in the world. I went to school out in Poughkeepsie, which I don't know if you can call Poughkeepsie, New York, the Catskills or not, but it's I certainly am a big fan of the Catskills. So hopefully it warms up there soon, because I know those spring mornings are very cold over there. So let's dive into it. I mean, the topic for discussion today is why digitalization is not enough, innovation that truly transforms how procurement is done. And this concept of digitalization is not enough, I mean, we started to chew on that a little bit last week when we were talking, and there's a big difference between digitalization and transformation based on what we all talked about. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that just right out of the gate. If I could get all three of your opinions on the differences between the two, that would be fantastic, because I'm sure a lot of people that are in the audience right now are trying to grapple with that as well. So why don't we start with Amrita, if it's okay with you. We'll start with you, and you can tell us a little bit about your perspective from a tools and a professional, from a solutions perspective, what the differences are. That'd be great.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about this topic, and it really stemmed from all those wonderful RFPs you guys send us. When we look at those, you see that like people are asking very end to end. We're in CLM, so end to end this specific feature versus that specific feature. And we find that a lot of it is, people are just taking their existing process and trying to find a tool that exactly fits that process, which one fits the best, versus kind of looking at necessarily the value to change that process or dramatically improve that process. And so that's what I see as the difference. And just to give you a couple examples, not even us, but the bidding platforms or auction-based bidding, that's transformative in how you do procurement, right? Putting the negotiation process, from passing it back in Word to just putting it into an app is still the same process. It's just in an app. So that's kind of what I look, how we look at it, is what is really going to transform how you do your business to improve it versus just taking your existing process and putting it online.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, right? It's okay, listen, you can take a lot of data and stick it into an Excel sheet, but until you actually create some type of an actionable item based on what's inside of that Excel sheet, it's really just digitalizing data, right? And this really isn't any different. It's just, okay, there's different segments inside of the procure to pay process. And obviously it's important to get things digitalized because obviously there's records and there's a lot of value in digitalization, but the transformation is really where you're striving for, whether or not you're talking about it or not. So Shachi, why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the differences between the two? That would be great.
Well, to me, Mike, digitalization is a subset of transformation, right? I think we as procurement are evolving and transforming into intelligent procurement. I think that is really what we are becoming more and more of. And when I talk about intelligence, I really like it when Tomas and we connected as well last week. We spoke about the emotional intelligence piece of it, right? And there's the proactive intelligence. So if you look at the world we're living in, like it's unprecedented what happened with the COVID and the supply chain resilience aspect that came front and center for us, that, we had gaps there. We're doing numerous amounts of integrations, mergers and acquisitions across different companies. And then procurement, which has been fighting for a seat at the table. How do you prove your value is through intelligence, right? So how do you go proactively with intelligent ideas to your different business segments? How do you then partner with the suppliers? To me, digitization fuels that. And I like the thing about the EQ piece of it, because at the end of the day, we all are becoming storytellers. And I think for us to do that right storytelling and connecting with the different stakeholders that we have, even with our supplier ecosystem, is connecting, right? And it's really truly connecting as to what are the true needs. And to me, digitization fuels that, right? But when I look at transformation as a whole, it's a holistic thing around people, process, data, analytics, and technology. So, and to me, that's just one subset that leads to that intelligent procurement.
That's a great nugget right there. I just wrote it down. Digitalization fuels transformation. I think that could be stuck on a bumper sticker or on a t-shirt somewhere. If that's not a logo of somebody's right now, they should pick it up and you should copyright that right away. Tomas, let's jump to you. Any thoughts around the differences between digitalization and transformation, what that means to you in your role?
Yeah, sure. So I would like really to build on what Shachi just said, because it does resonate very well. I think the first thing before investing any money in tools, people, systems, and so on is to say, what is it really that you want to achieve? And why are you doing it? Which kind of starts really with the transformation step one. And then the next question really is, how much are you really willing to transform? Because most often the question is, oh, I want to transform, but don't touch me, don't touch my organization, and don't touch my high potential guys, right? Because
absolutely.
But let's imagine you have a big table and you remove your own chair from the table, right? And now you stand, you don't have a chair anymore. And now, okay, let's start with myself, right? And then from here on, you say, okay, now my job is gone. I need to reinvent my job within the transformation journey. And I will then go into hopefully this digital world. But here we have to be a little bit careful, because I think the digital world in procurement is a little bit behind actually quite behind of many things that you can see on the sales revenue management side. And for those who, very often the leaders who unlock the budgets for the investments, get very often disappointed with the initial expectation, the final outcome. And because the procurement world of digitalization is not completely there yet, so you can come very close. But for me, is really to get ready for a 2025 type of agenda. But if certain fundamentals, and I think Shachi will probably speak about it later on the core layer and data and so on, but you need to start with your core layers and you need to build your way up. But before everything, it's a mindset change. And that mindset change, that's when the transformation and the digitalization comes into play. And the digitalization, you didn't ask the question, but versus automation is really that you get information data from several sources, inside and outside. And then we will probably talk about it. You go into insights, meaning you get a certain set of information that is ready to go to make a decision. You don't question what you see, you just act on what you see. But that takes a lot of trust and a lot of testing and comfort building that is not natural to us, depending how we grew up and depending on the industry that you act in.
Amrita, is this resonating with you? I mean, you have a lot of conversations with a lot of different organizations. Does this tend to be, is this what you're hearing basically everywhere right now?
Yeah, I actually, in preparation for this was just reading an article yesterday. I think BCG put out a survey last year, and I was actually surprised by this. It said that although many companies are undergoing digital transformation in their efforts, in their organizations in procurement, that only 22% are happy with how it's going.
Yeah.
So there is that has to be an expectation mismatch, right?
Yes.
Or it doesn't really say why, but it just says that that they're not happy with it. And I think part of what we had in our discussion was that, are there unrealistic expectations? We're finding that people, I guess because we're in AI, we feel like people either tend to be one end or the other. So you do have this unrealistic expectations on what AI can do. And on the other hand, you have people who say, because there's so much AI washing, that don't have an understanding of AI, that they don't believe that it can help them. So we kind of see this, big. Initially, we see the two polars, and then once we kind of, we have to kind of coach them on what's realistic. But definitely see that.
And Mike, can I add? So when Tomas was talking about the whole outcome-based digitalization, right? And to your point, Amrita, the gap, right? So the good news is, right, what companies are now working on, especially, I would assume in the procurement digital or technology groups, is both on the foundation piece of it, which is integral to the operations, but at the same time at solving the specific business problems that different stakeholders have, right? And I think that's how you kind of do that expectation management, where you, and the good news is that we now have so many of these niche point solutions out there. Our whole procurement digital ecosystem has blown up with so many of these companies over the past, I would even say like 5 years, Amrita, right? It's really grown, where what we have seen even outside of procurement technology is in the past 10 years, the change we have seen is more than what we saw in the past 250 years, right? I read that somewhere. The good news for us is when we now, as procurement leaders, need to solve those specific business problems. If somebody comes to us, they're like, solve the risk problem for me, where I need to know proactively, am I at risk financially? Am I going to have a cyber attack? Or is my supply chain resilient for my critical materials? We now have those solutions that can help us solve the specific problems at pace, right? Which is why the expectation management is, yes, we will keep building the foundations. At the same time, can we build the innovative niche solutions like contract AI, all the others, which help us solve pointed issues that different groups may have. So
it's so true. Yeah, because I think that what you're saying is that if you look across, a lot of the unhappiness is when people try to put one solution in that solves everything, and then everybody feels like their problem didn't get solved. It's like the big ERP days, right? And then that's why. And we had one client, and I'll hand it over to Tomas. I'm sure you have something to say about this, but we had one prospect that had just implemented a fairly well-known end-to-end good CLM. And 3 months in, came to us and said, we're thinking of abandoning it because we can't get our contracts, our past contracts in, and the data out of our past contracts. So that was a very big problem for them, that they realized that this tool wasn't going to solve for them. And then they were all unhappy, but I was like, you can keep that. And you can also add this, right? Like you don't have to, but it was a very difficult mindset change, that wanting one thing that would do everything. And it was kind of, you know, it wasn't working for them.
I love this. I love this panel. You guys are like a thoroughbred coming out of the gate. So I want to rein back the reins just a little bit, because we're already talking about things that I've got planned for us to talk about a little bit later on. But I love the fact that you're coming out trying to get to the finish line. It's fantastic. So really quick, Tomas, before we jump back in on that. So I'm sorry, Shachi, when we first spoke last week in the warm-up, you talked a little bit about, and you outlined it very, very clearly for all of us, and I think Tomas will agree. For me, it was very clear. I thought it was an exceptional way of placing this, was in a hierarchy almost of how to approach this. And I'm a very visual person, so for me, hierarchies, I can almost see the PowerPoint slide of this document that you kind of laid out. In my head, I was visualizing what the slide would look like. So can you tell us a little bit about this tiered approach that you talked about on how to potentially succeed at transformation inside of your organization? And then Tomas, if you could give us some feedback on that, that would be great.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, since you're a visual person, it's funny. We actually call it our layered cake. So
yeah. I was thinking pyramid more than cake.
It's like the layered cake is what we call it.
Whatever the shape, I see it.
So well, that's, let's say, an internal joke we have in the company, the layered cake, right? So anyway, so when I was talking initially about the intelligent procurement, what we have come up with is a digital architecture to meet that need, right? To get to that intelligent procurement. And we have 5 layers to it. So we start at the core at the very bottom. And these are, as Amrita was saying, these are some of those, old school or very relevant still ERP tools that we have, which we need to have to run our operations day to day, right? And it could be different things. Like, for example, we use Viva, we use Ariba, we use many different, we use Hyperion, for example, for our financial reporting, all those core systems that you need to run your day-to-day business, right? Mm-hmm. That's your foundational piece for us. The second layer on top of it is data, and data is, to me, principally one of the most important elements, because it, first of all, the credibility of the data, so the quality of the data is so key. And the connectivity, right? So when people talk about blockchains and stuff like that, if you can maintain that integrity of the data throughout your entire end-to-end processes that you have, all the way from insights to payment, right? Your whole source to pay journey that you have, that's key. And this would be like your vendor master. This could be your category, your material group, your material items. It could be anything. That's the key layer that we have. And we have started introducing this concept of the supplier 360, right? So if you have a supplier, you need to know everything about them, more than the master data, but everything that you're doing with them, along with their risk profile, along with what's their different kind of other offerings that they have, and et cetera. The third layer for us is analytics and intelligence, and that's really, to me, key, and I'll come back to it in a bit. But the fourth one is, for us, the niche applications, which Amrita, we just spoke about, right? So these are these point solutions, which are really those could be best of breed, very nimble, tend to be sometimes very cost effective, are willing to innovate and collaborate with you at pace, and are flexible, right? And I think that's the biggest up point. And what's interesting is there's a diversity component to it too, because a lot of these companies tend to be small, diverse. In some way, you're kind of even empowering whatever community that you're working with in moving forward, going for these niche applications, if you look at the ecosystem out there, right? And again, examples of that, like, I will talk about in a bit, but we're looking at like companies like Resiling, Decideware, Tealbook. There's so many examples. And lastly, we have the experience layer. And that, to me, is the most important layer, because that's really your abstract. What happens is that's your interaction with the different user groups you have. So you have your business user groups, you can have your procurement and finance teams, and then you can have your suppliers. And depending on the user experience that they want, your system is intelligent enough where it abstracts everything at the bottom. So the user doesn't need to know. And I was giving the example of the Apple iPhone, right? Like, you have an OS and then you have the apps. Nobody needs to know what's happening between the OS and the apps. Someone has a specific need, goes to an app, right? Similar, but the apps in our case need to speak to each other as well. So it's not independent, sometimes siloed things. Or if you think of you're driving like a high-end car, like a I don't know, whatever car. I'm not that good with cars, but so you as again as a person are experiencing the experience of driving that car or Tesla. You don't need to know what's the technology underneath it, right? So more and more companies, not just within procurement, in the digital architecture, are going for this UX layer, which is really that platform experience that they want. And the only thing I would really highlight, and when I was talking about the analytics and intelligence, which I was going to come back to, I think of it almost as the human body where you have all these different organs and all that, but the nerves, right? The synapses which connect and talk to each other, that's your analytics and intelligence. And when Tomas was talking about intelligence, how do you have that integrated source to pay connection? How do you have the right kind of decision making at the right time? So that's what that analytics and intelligence is about. That's supplier risk intelligence, category intelligence, and that's what makes the difference, right? So that's what we are bringing to life. And again, it's a multi-pronged approach. So you don't just work on one layer, you work on multiple layers. And from an expectation management point of view, if you work on your niche as well as your user experience, you end up meeting a lot of the expectations that a lot of different stakeholders have, where you can't solve for everything all at once.
Right. Yeah. We're going to talk about managing expectations, dreamland versus reality in a minute. But Tomas, and I'm gonna jump. I was planning on going to Amrita next, but I'm gonna go to Tomas because you were talking about UI a lot there. Tomas, you talk a lot about bots and engagement with bots and the UX, the user interface associated with a lot of the systems and the API feeds and things like that. You've got some really interesting thoughts on how bots should work, how bots probably can work for us, and then obviously we've got a bunch of management who've seen way too many sci-fi movies and they're way out into the future. Tell me a little bit about your thought based on the hierarchy that Shachi just rolled out, and where do you see right now the user interface, and what are you envisioning? Because I love where you took this last week when we were chatting.
Yeah, so I think first, yes, Shachi, I think you explained it very well. Those 5 layers. I think people who are listening in is probably you will pay thousands of dollars to get this little graph. Probably you got it for free here, but I really encourage everybody to think about it, because it's really true. It's really a fundamental that drives a lot. If a few years back, not so many, maybe 5, 6, 7 years back, a lot of time was spent in what Shachi calls here the core layer, where to invest in a source to pay, where to invest in data, and so on. And the whole industry focused a lot on that side. And then, the technologies have evolved. Some are doing great, others not so great. But then certainly I came to the realization that the 5th level, the user experience, really, when you're on the indirect side, less on the direct side, but if you're on the indirect side, the requesters, is really the whole company who will judge you, or will judge us, I should say, on the user experience, how easy it is to go on a tool, how fast can you get your mouse, how easy can you get a consultant in. You need 20 new temps in your organization, and you don't care how all that works. You just want them in, get your job, and get them out when the job is done. And you want to have this new software that tracks your assets and get it in, and you're in a lab, and you don't want to wait 2 weeks for supplier onboarding. You want to get them in immediately, test them, they're not doing well, get them out, the next one is in 3 days later. And procurement struggles with that, right? So procurement struggles with cycle time. Procurement is slow very often because we are the execution arm of compliance, as I like to say, which is part of our role. And that's where the world is changing, right? How do we interfere with the users? And that's why I put so much emphasis on the user experience. And yeah, so for example, if imagine you will start your investment file, instead of doing from savings, you go off a level of satisfaction from your requesters. Imagine you would start to invest, well, maybe I would like to have a great chatbot, and that chatbot helps me around. Well, that's where the solution can come in quickly, right? Because then somebody would say, maybe I would speak to my computer and I ask, what is my biggest spend item? And then the computer answers me, what is this biggest spend item? Who is my biggest supplier? Well, it will maybe happen in 10 years, or 5, but not now, right? And so really, this whole 5 layers that Shachi was explaining, and the question you had, Mike, it's really of what do you value. It comes back to why do you want to transform? Where do you stand even today? But one thing is sure, if you don't have your core layer in place, it's very hard to go up that ladder. And from the level 1 to level 5, depending on the industry and your motivation, it's not in months, but it's in years.
Yeah.
And that's very often where disappointment comes into play, because many consulting firms, not to blame consultants, but is that it's a fast pace that everything can be done in 3 weeks and 2 months, and you get a miracle out of that. That's not the case.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, which is the technology, the user interface aspect of it isn't in some cases isn't there right now. But if you sit back for a moment and look at where we are in the last 5 years from a technology explosion perspective, and I like to use the word buy tech, right, versus purchasing tech. I mean, there's buy tech in the supply chain, there's buy tech in indirect spend. Contract AI is, in my opinion, a buy tech solution, right? I look at it and I'm constantly in this argument where my wife is barking at her phone and saying, Siri, I need this, Siri, I need that. And she gets upset with the fact that the bot isn't there yet. And I'm like, wait a minute, let's take a moment to marvel on the fact that you're holding a computer that's more powerful than the computer that put people on the moon. Let's stop with that for a second. And yes, the user interface associated with the bot that's attempting to change the world isn't quite there yet and can't figure out when the pizza place down the street closes. But the fact that you have something that can put people on the moon 10 times over in your hand is by itself a miracle, right? So it's a lot of being able to, and I think as it comes, I see the bots and the chats and I mean, they also have to deal with the fact that people like myself have accents from Boston, Massachusetts, right? But I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in there. Amrita, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that from a solution provider perspective, I mean, you're right in the middle of this, right? Contract AI is very transformative, transformational. You're obviously digitalizing a lot of the contract elements of what goes into it. Does this all resonate with you? Do you see where Shachi, I mean, you're right in the middle of that stack, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, a couple comments I'll make is that I think the user experience is very important. And there's a couple questions that come up, and we always get this integration question, right? How do you deal with that when you're trying to use best of breed? And best of breed used to be difficult because you would have to, be long integrations. And I think that's what's really turned large companies off. But I think, there's a balance there. And now, you don't have to have full end-to-end integration. If there is a point solution that really, that can pull what you need, put out the data that you need, kind of a very simple integration. So if the value is there in the tool, right? And then that is kind of enough. We had one customer who said, I want I want a button on Ariba. If I can have that, then it'll be fine. And we're like, well, if Ariba doesn't let us do it, then it's not perfect. I get it's not uniform, but what are you gonna do? But you have to just weigh the benefits. I think the strive for full uniformity or full integration is holding companies back. And if you look at the data, I think can't remember who, but Amazon Business put out an article and said the number one roadblock to digitization and procurement was integration, 76%. Everything else was 40 something. So I think there is, exactly what people have to look at it the way Shachi's looking at it, that there's a whole layer. You have to think about what makes sense to integrate, what doesn't. Maybe it doesn't need to be perfect. But you still, if you solve a big enough problem for the user, then the user experience doesn't have to be completely seamless, right? If you're solving a big enough problem.
So I'm going to go to the questions really quickly because there's a couple of questions. A couple of them I'm going to hit later on, but one of them right now. Integration with other technologies is a big issue. How do we get all the data under all these different technologies to be uniform and usable. And I think
That's
I'll jump in on this one for a second, because I think, Amrita, what you're saying and what I'm hearing from you all is the evolution of API and integration is happening so rapidly with things even like Zapier and some of the, I mean, you could be a no code intellectual right now and create really interesting integrations between systems right now, just on basic things. I mean, you take some of the coders behind the scenes that are doing API feeds and hooks and web hooks into other things. I mean, there's that is happening so fast right now that I don't actually think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you have to actually get the data to be uniform in order for it to be usable anymore. Is that accurate? I mean, have we that was the old ERP theory, which is, okay, I need to get all this data into one place, right? Where, I mean, I used to be at Publicis Group and we had 18 ERP systems, and it was, okay, let's all get down to one ERP system and then we'll have a system of record, where it's like, okay, forget it. We've spent billions of dollars attempting to do that. Let's abandon that strategy altogether and figure out how we can get all these things to work together enough so that we can get to Tomas's world, which is, I can just layer a UI interface on top of this and get what I need to get out of it without having it all in one uniform lake. Is that? I'll go to Shachi for comment.
I mean, so when the key word is fit for purpose, to what Amrita said, right? And I think so integration, we think of APIs, and the good news is, Amrita, all companies like even Ariba is now opening up to the concept of an open API, and so everybody is opening up their doors, like they want to now integrate with different plugins. But I think the two things, so integration is important, but you don't necessarily have to have it depends. You have to pick and choose if it needs to be an end-to-end, as we were saying, right? Second piece of it, and I think that's the trick between that user experience, is two things. It's about the workflows, which is a very process delivered thing, and that's how one particular system can talk to the other system. It's like a relay race, right? You pass on the baton to the next app or system or whatever, or team, right? Think of it, somebody who's sourcing then passes it to contracting, and then so on and so forth, right? That's one thing that's very important. And then the decision engine, which is what I call the brain, right? So when I keep saying intelligence, so your brain and the decision engine is, at what point in your decision flow chart do you go left or you go right or you go somewhere? And that's where you need to build some kind of intelligence. And that intelligence to me could be mapping tables. When we talk about, category rules and thresholds and stuff like that, to me, that's a decision engine, right? How do you direct people in the right? So to Tomas's point earlier, we get judged by the experience anybody within the company has buying a widget, right? And if we have the right workflows and we have the right decision engines, that we take Mr. X or Miss X down a path and guide them, and that's what we call intelligent guided experiences, using whatever app is relevant, right? So that's really where we are headed. And I think that's what we're trying to solve for. We don't want to churn the ocean, but you then connect the right apps with each other. It doesn't have to be everything.
Right. And you're a large company, so it's like you have the means to be able to do all of that also, which is you can put that on that UI layer on top, which is great.
I love that. I love that guided intelligent experiences, right? For me, and I was just on a conversation talking about this the other day, which was, hey, I don't have time to work on, and somebody asked me the other day, I only have 5 employees. How do I figure out how many of them how do I distribute them, right? And it comes down to, in a lot of cases, Amrita, it comes down to how much time do they spend on contract negotiation, right? And I think if we could figure out a way, and I may be just sticking my foot in my mouth here, because you tell me if it's already been solved. If there's a way for a solution like Contract AI to be able to give guided intelligent experiences that augment the staffing process associated with what needs to be concluded, then more addressable spend can be achieved through most of the procurement organizations in the world, because everybody I meet is understaffed, right? Everybody I meet. So it's all about time management. And that theory that Shachi just talked about guiding you through a decision-making process of, okay, listen, here's a $500,000 contract. I don't have enough staff to even look at $500,000 contracts. I'm at $1 million and more because I've got a small team. But on a $500,000 contract, I might let a stakeholder make some decisions based on some intelligent routing associated with a product like Contract AI, right? I mean, is that where we're going?
Yeah, I think so. And I think sometimes when we're evaluating tools, we're thinking about every single case, right? Like this won't work for my 100-page contract with my outsourcing service provider that's 5 years, and probably not, most things won't, because that's going to take some customization and legal. But I think there is a lot of, especially in the contracting world, a low-hanging fruit or contracts that are done over and over again, where if you look at your historical data, you know where your thresholds are, for example. You already know it, it's just someone hasn't written it down in a paper, and that would take a long time manually, right? So you can learn a lot from the high volume, the ones that you're doing over and over again, that can really, shave off a lot of time from procurement and legal, frankly.
And talking about CLM, the other thing is, again, we need to do the work. So it's not tech that's going to solve your problems. It's not magic. So when you do like template standardization, clause library standardization, that's what brings CLM to life, right? And that's where you do the best resource utilization also, because you don't have multiple templates, which are flying around, right? So I just want to say tech happens when people, process, and data is enabled in the front end, and then you are primed, or you can do it in parallel. But technology is not the magic. Sometimes you have to do the holistic piece of it.
Let's jump. I want to jump because I'm looking at the clock and we're already 40 minutes into this, even though it feels like we just started 2 minutes ago. I want to talk about something that's already been in the thread of discussion a little bit today: managing expectations, keeping leadership's expectations in check, right? I've got this section, real deliverables versus dream worlds. I think we all have met senior leadership folks who see a little too much of science fiction movies and believe that based on their most recent science fiction movie, that they have some type of android artificial intelligence person like Data from Star Trek that they can just ask questions to, and he spits out the answer at any given time. So I want to ask Tomas, are the senior leaders of companies in touch with the capabilities of the current technology, in your opinion? And I'm going to go back to that example that you used, which is bot technology, right? So where do you think leadership is in their expectations versus what's deliverable today?
It's a complex question, really, right?
Strictly from a transformational perspective. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's a complex question, right? Because any investments, you want to have an ROI coming back.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, when we go into transformation and we go into digitalization, the truth of the matter is that you can't get the traditional savings out of procurement to justify everything you do. I mean, you can if you have bad pricing in place or unmanaged spend, and then hopefully you drag everything through. But the reality is that you need to define some kind of investment that is right for the organization in order to turn around organizations, and that has a price. Now, you don't want just to dismantle organization, let everybody go, hire fresh and start again. I mean, you can, I guess, but that's not the most respectable way to do it. Some people end up, if you go 10 years back, that's what people did, right? You dismantle the organization, you put a BPO in place, the BPO runs for 3 years, and then you insource it back in. It's very cold way to manage things, but I guess it can work. But you lose a lot of knowledge, right? So the expectation management then goes is that high leadership is always surrounded by very smart guys, right? And certainly very smart partners from the consulting world. And they're not wrong. It's only that we're a little bit early in time, So if you permit me, Mike, I was taking notes while everybody was speaking, is that if we can take a time spaceship, right? And we go into 2025 now. Now, what's happening in 2025? 2025, you will have platforms running where you don't need a buyer for everything you source.
Correct.
You will have specializations, maybe very special lab equipments of something very tailor-made that you need to have. So there will be platforms out there where people will start to share certain categories where you don't need an organization, but you need to have somebody who manages that platform. You will have platforms where you onboard suppliers based on compliance, on eco-green, on sustainability, where trustful companies can join. Everybody will not have access to that, but you don't need anymore those 2 weeks of onboarding suppliers with those 200 questions that suppliers have to answer. This will be gone. You're part of that platform. You belong to that platform. If it's good for you, Mike, it's good for me. We move
Right.
on.
Right.
So you will have that. You will have collaboration platforms. Imagine a world where the emails will drop down, and we do it without even noticing it. No, I mean, we have, I don't know, in my company, Juniper, we have teams, right? So we go more and more into teams. We go more and more into group discussions. Collaboration will be the big thing, but collaboration will be by subject. I can have a collaboration with an internal person. I can have a collaboration with 10 other suppliers that are really my partners. And when you go this, you will see your emails going down, you will see forms disappearing, and you will probably maybe even go to the day where there is no need for a PO and invoice. I'm still puzzled why in 2020 or 2021, I should say, why do we even have an invoice nowadays? I can make an international transfer personally to anywhere in the world I want. I mean, I guess legally, right? In any respectable country I want in the world. I don't send any invoice. I don't send any paper. It goes over bank transfer, right? So why don't we speak about blockchain and so on, but why cannot a simple code take care about the PR and invoice, and we don't have all that anymore? So that's where it's going. So the question really is, how do you value your partnerships, your supplier partnerships, and how do you want your organization to drive between the technologies, the transformation, and be ready for that world? That's the fundamental question. Now, if you really have unmanaged spend and you don't know where your spend is and you don't have basic controls in place, for sure, digitalization is not for you. You need to start with an S2P. I mean, if you don't have an S2P, source to pay tool, it's very, very difficult to do anything. So that goes back to the layer one. I think that Shachi was explaining, is that you need to have some core layers in place. And then from here on, you want to skip the different phases. And that's where the disappointment comes into place, because nobody wants to buy a tool anymore because you can't build a personal story on that, right? But you want to sell a little bit of this dream thing, you know? And that's the part that the magic then happens at one moment. You release the money, and then the magic is not completely happen as you imagined. And you know, I was a few years back, I was in the perfume industry, right? And the perfume industry, that you want to sell a perfume that brings you somewhere in your dreams, right? That's why you're paying for it, right? You want to feel great, you want to smell good, you want to be somebody, and suddenly you discover you're not that person. It's a very big disappointment, right? So it's the same thing here, right?
Yeah, I love where you're going with that. I think that obviously, I think that collaboration is at the center of the universe, because I created a community so that peer-to-peer practitioners can collaborate no matter what company they're in across the globe. So I see collaboration as a huge thing. And I think one of the things that's really interesting that you talk about, and if you look at, if you do a deep dive down into smart contracts associated with the blockchain, I think that smart contracts might be the elimination of the invoice that you're looking for. It's already got the currency associated with it from a currency, whether it's Bitcoin or another alt currency, right, inside of the blockchain. And a smart contract associated with something like that, even though the inventor of smart contract says they're not too smart, can automate that process. And once the criteria are met, it's done, and the transfer. I mean, I think the biggest question, maybe in 2030, maybe if we jump out another 10 years, is, okay, which currency do you want to get paid in? Right? I'd like to get paid in dog coin, or maybe Procurement Foundry coin, or whatever the heck coin you want to get paid in. But again, you know, why stick it to one currency and one invoice? Why not let the blockchain and the smart contracts do that? Amrita, am I way off base on that, or am I pulling a Star Trek on it?
Oh God, no! The whole blockchain is a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's you need to have a few sessions on that one.
Yeah, I'd like to dive into that. I mean, especially from where you're at, right? Working on a contract in legal product, right? I mean, I think we need to come back and talk a little bit more about where smart contracts and blockchain as a whole is going. And I'd love to hear the perspective from you. I'm not going to dive into it right now, because I know that that's a little too far out there. But I think that that's definitely another topic for another day. I had a quick question. Says, Thomas, that's an interesting review regarding invoices. How do you track that? How do approvals work? And I think I kind of tipped on it a little bit, where I think it's going personally, but I don't know if you got an answer for that. How to fix that right now?
Well, the company wants always to have approvals, right? It's a requirement to run a corporate, so that's not. But what you will see more and more is that you look at an Amazon business platform, right? They work with ghost cards, right? So you don't have really an invoice anymore. So if you adopt an Amazon business, you go with ghost cards in general. Small spend, especially in America and Europe, and Europe a little bit less actually, but other countries are making progress, is the whole PCAD concept, right? So the PCAD concept for small spend is disappearing. So you see it's steps by steps where things are evolving, and you will see more and more consolidated invoices crossing multiple entities in a given month, so that things are easy to track. Are we there? No, we are not, right? But for sure, you have platforms, I guess not necessarily good to name here, but there are investors out there that are trying to build platforms, and then that platform makes an agreement with a big bank, and the bank then agrees to settle all pending payments across the different members of that platform. So you will see that happening probably very soon in the next 2-3 years. But the thing is, again, a mindset change, right? The mindset change, is this a topic that interests the company? And is the company willing to release resources and time to dig into it? And is the company interested and motivated to run proof of concepts, to finance them, and also accept the fact that probably 50% of the proof of concept will not work? So how innovative as an organization do you want to be? And naturally, procurement traditionally has never been super innovative, right? It's more like manage your suppliers, bring me the money and go home, right? But at this point, it's changing. And what we are really going through the transformation and digitalization, I think it will open a lot of new career paths. If you're technology driven, if you're analytical, if you're data driven, if you're supply and negotiation driven, but the traditional negotiation versus data is probably disappearing. And I have always been amazed that if you look at a powerful country like the US, right, there are not many master degrees specialized in procurement. I'm not talking about supply chain. I'm not talking about manufacturing. I'm not talking about operations. I'm really truly talking about procurement. And you don't have it. So you can ask the question, why is that?
Yeah.
Right. So, and the reason is that it has never been super attractive. Now, I think that digitalization will open many, many new career paths. And there is, but of course, it's all about the energy management and how much the organization is willing to invest in people who want to explore those new activities. That conversation is already a digital transformation discussion, because that's what leads you to the final outcome. Or you fall back into saving money, which is not part of this conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I want to just do a time check on time. We got about 7 minutes left. I'm going to go a little bit faster here because I've got a bunch of questions that I haven't been able to get to, but I want to jump in. Amrita, just really quickly for you, when you're dealing with a lot of clients on a daily basis, is it more about setting proper expectations? Like, how much of what you're doing right now is setting proper expectations for success for people and shepherding them through to success versus trying to provide pie in the sky? And then second part to that question is, who's approaching you right now for transformational projects? Is it procurement? Is it IT? Where are you seeing that happen?
Right. Managing expectations, I would say it's the former that you said. We are definitely a little bit holding hands on expectations, but I think, our early clients that we had, they are the true innovators. So so we're lucky. They're easy to work with in the sense that they're excited about innovating with us. So that's where we are in our maturity cycle. Who is coming to us? It's definitely, we've been, do we market to IT? Do we market to procurement? We have really focused on procurement because of the business problem that we solve in reducing the negotiation time. That's the significant problem we solve. And so we have focused on them, and so they are more likely to come to us. But what we're also seeing is innovation departments are coming to us that are under the COO office or the CIO office. So we're having a lot more recent discussions with them as well.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of coming at you from all angles. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and then I'd say that the one thing, because we are an AI platform company, right? So a lot of them, when we might be talking about contract AI, and then they're looking at, oh, what about, can we build this app or integrate this, or, kind of do an offshoot based on your platform. And so that's getting us a lot of interest there. And that's where some of those connectors that Sachi's talking about could be.
I want to jump really quick. We got 5 minutes left. One or two words really quickly on personnel and talent pool and what people need in the future, right? So Tomas, in 60 seconds or less, what do you think are some of the primary skill sets that are going to be needed in the future for practitioners who stay in this game?
I think in the world of procurement, for sure you will see, you will always need to have the great negotiator who cuts deals, right?
Yep.
It's a profile you need in procurement, right?
Yep.
But that person needs to be protected time-wise, not to get distracted with operational activities, with investments, with the internal focused activities. So imagine that you have this great negotiator group and they just cut deals. And they should not be worried about anything happening inside the organization. The second group then is all what we call I guess a few years back, Center of Excellence, operation centers and all that, but it becomes a smart operation center, right? Here you go into technology, here you go into the emotional intelligence, here you go into the change management transformation and being a good listener and so on. And it's a very, very rich skill set and can be very, very attractive for many people. And then you go really into the data, right? And data, and probably, I think if I had to design completely from scratch and I could do what I wanted, I would probably bring in somebody who has a minimum understanding of the APIs from the technology perspective.
Yep.
What is real, what is not real. I would probably bring somebody in who has great understanding of a data lake, right?
Yep.
What is really a data lake? How does it work? So if you have technology, you have the center of excellence, and then you have the negotiator. If you can find this magic sauce to bring all three together, I think you're really, really well set to deliver a lot of value for the organization and really have a great career for yourself. Do you stay then in procurement? Do you move on out of procurement? It doesn't matter, but you really can give yourself really an edge and everything. But just before I finish on that, I think it starts with ourselves, right? How much time each of us do we spend reading or taking a class or spending time like we do here per week, per month, let's say per month, right? Yeah. And we're always busy. I cannot join conferences. I cannot read anything. I don't have time for a blog. I don't have time. Well, then it gets very dry very quickly, right? That means that you will not have an opinion and somebody will tell you what to do. And then it starts to get difficult,
Great. I'm sorry, Shachi. One or two key things, and also just wanted to, somebody said, how can I learn more about contract AI in the questions? If you go to the chat, Kat put some information in there about the chat. They've got an upcoming demo coming in on 3/31. If you want to learn more about contract AI, I know we talked a lot about the capabilities and functionality today. You can check out the chat, and there's a link in there for you to get more information there. Shachi, I want to go back to that real quickly because I've got 2 minutes left, and I want to wrap up and take just one takeaway from everybody. What is some key skill sets that people are going to need?
I think at the end of it, we need to be category experts, because at the end of the day, so to what Tomas said, you need people who are front facing with all the business stakeholders, even with the suppliers, to get the best value and to project the best value, innovative ideas, and all. Somebody who can connect the different dots and be those storytellers. I always say that people who can connect the dots and all that.
Yep.
I agree with Tomas that behind the scene, then you have this whole intelligence hub, right? You have these teams that are data savvy, that are connecting everything. They're basically giving you the pre-cooked meal, passing it on to that category business representative saying, here, these are a list of possible ideas. When you sit on the table and, when you're doing budget planning or when you're doing like your quarterly reviews, these are the ideas that you can pitch, right? To me, I always still feel that category expertise is key, because that's the value we as procurement bring, but then we should be able to convey that, right? The ability to storytell, right? Secondly, the intelligence hub behind that, people who are digitally savvy, data savvy, people are able to take internal intelligence, what we're doing, what we're spending on, what are we contracting on with the external intelligence, right? External could be risk, market, supplier, different facets that we have. I think that's fundamental. And then you need disruptors. I mean, I think where Salesforce went with the sales ecosystem and for procurement to get there, when I talk to people like you, Mike, and I talk to Dr. Epstein from Kearney, you need those disruptors who can see procurement being so much more than it is.
Yeah.
And I think those are the kind of leaders. To me, that's where fundamentally, I think the stuff that we're doing, which, because somebody was asking this question about ROI, and I'll tell you one thing, the biggest thing about ROI for procurement is, first of all, your cross-functional relationships, right? How are you partnering with IT? How are you partnering with finance? What are you going and telling your CEO that your value as procurement is? For example, in BMS, the group talks about, we're working on enterprise risk management. We're the one-stop shop to help you with enterprise risk management, whether it is cyber, finance, whether it's supply chain, anything. The other thing we're doing is supply diversity and innovation. So we're doing open-end innovation. So what Thomas spoke about, POCs, proof of concept, so that the ROI conversation and the mindset shift can happen, right? You test and you learn. And you say, this is how we generate value. This is how we drive innovation. So we need those kind of leaders who are bold and are disruptors. Yeah. So to me, those are the three things. So everything Thomas said, I echo that. And then you just add on some of these characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. I know it's always a great conversation when we run out of time. I'm gonna go out on a limb. We have a Clubhouse organization. I think most of you know already, we've got a Clubhouse community inside a Clubhouse for Procurement Foundry. I would love to get the three of us back into a Clubhouse room sometime in the next couple of weeks and continue this conversation on, because I think that we could do some amazing things in Clubhouse together. I'd invite all three of you to come to my Clubhouse community and we can continue this conversation on. But that said, we're out of time. I want to go back one more time, even though we're at 2:02, because we haven't lost anybody in the room for the most part. Just one last takeaway. So if there's one thing you can leave the audience with today, Shachi, and I'll go around and everybody, and we'll finish up with Amrita. Shachi, what's your one takeaway for the day that people can use right now?
Don't try to solve for everything at once. So deal with different stakeholders where you go for innovative solutions at pace. So work with people like Contract AI, and there's so many wonderful providers out there. So many of my friends actually have started companies. It's amazing. So I think that's the takeaway. At the same time, foundation is important. I will always stress that, but there's a thing that happen in parallel. Yeah, I love you said something earlier, and I paraphrased it for you. Perfection is getting in the way of progress, and I love that. That's one of my big things, is don't get stuck in the minutia, right? Thomas, what about yourself? One takeaway for the audience?
Yeah, don't be afraid to try. Yeah, that's really what it is.
Cast the lines and go sail, right? You're not sailing until you're actually off the dock, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Amrita, how about yourself? What have you got for folks? And finally, one last thing, because like I said, make sure you tell us how we get in touch with you too, okay?
Yeah, I would just say, look beyond your current process. Don't get bogged down in what you're currently doing right now.
That's huge. Yeah. I mean, that's huge, right? Because people just they're like, oh my God, there's no way out of this, right? Like, I'm just gonna have to focus on what I can do today, and they can't look outside of the peril that they're in today to know that there might be a solution right around the corner for them. And like you said, one of the things that you provide back is time. I don't think people realize that they can buy time by implementing some solutions, and they're not that difficult now, and the API connections are there. So it's super great time to be in this industry. I want to thank you all. It's been an amazing conversation today. I think, like I said, I'd love to kind of do an after hours on Clubhouse with the three of you. I'll set that up with my team, and we'll put that on LinkedIn so that we can get some more exposure on this. I've got about a half a dozen more questions that I'd like to ask you, and I know we have some people that we didn't get answered. So I will try and get those questions answered for you inside of this as well, and put them inside of the community as well, inside of the Procurement Foundry. Thank you all very much. Record audience today. Thank you to the panelists. Absolutely amazing conversation. And I look forward to continuing with you all soon. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Mike, so much for hosting. Thank you.
All right. how do I, oh, I gotta press the button.